All right, gentlemen, good to have you all. It's a pleasure. Hello, Enda. Hello, Brena. Hello, LB.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Okay.
nice. How's it going, man?
So, welcome to the first episode of the Roundtable podcast, the purpose of which is to bring those together who are knowledgeable in competitive Souls like PvP and discuss the current issues of the game, what can be changed, and how we can adapt for future fight clubs, tournaments, and the meta overall.
So we got a couple of topics to talk about, mostly PvP focus, but some PvE focus as well. Before we begin, I want to get some quick intros out of the way, starting with Brenna. Go ahead.
What? And
Introduce yourself.
you went with me first,
You prefer beauty, Brena.
I what? Wait,
What do you do?
I didn't really get the whole introductions part, like what we're supposed to talk about with that.
Who you
um,
are, what you do.
yeah, just yeah, quick summary of like what you do.
I'm Bathedinbrena, and I hosted 85 tournaments for Souls, Dark Souls so far. Looking to go to Elden Ring and continue to do that. For like my jobs, I do a lot of stuff actually. Mainly, I was a restaurant manager for like a long time, but like property management, restaurant management, and like other stuff like side jobs like I do now.
Oh. So all that management experience that like bleeds into what you do for tournaments.
Oh yeah, managing people. That's what I've done for like a long time. So
All right, that's actually really cool. And 80 tournaments, I didn't know you did that much. I know you blew past me in number of tournaments done, but 80, wow, that's actually amazing.
yeah, I did
Uh,
12 Halo Reach tournaments too, like back in like the mid 2000s. Those were a
oh,
lot of fun.
shit.
That's kind of what inspired me being involved in that.
Hmm.
And I was I played in a lot of Magic the Gathering card tournaments like a long time ago, like quite a lot.
For
So kind of been
me,
around tournaments for a while.
okay, that's interesting. For me, my inspiration for doing tournaments was just watching old PvP tournaments for Demon Souls from the Japanese community way back in the day. Moving on, Enda, you're next.
Hey, I'm End of the Line. I'm a duelist, a fight club host, and a tournament organizer and caster. And I think I've only joined the Souls community. I'm a baby PvP here. I've been only at this Lark for the last I think a year now, and the community's taken me in with open arms, and I'm really happy to be involved with the New York scene and this podcast itself as well, Knight.
Hmm.
Really happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you. Seen some of your work, seen some of your tournaments, and I really like how you guys organize things, and like your commentary is pretty good too. Um,
It's been a wild ride. Let's put it that way. The last year, I
mhm.
did not expect that I'd be taken in quite as well as I have, but you know what? Here I am. So just gonna keep winging it in
Yeah, man, keep it
style, I
up.
think.
LB.
Yeah, I'm LBU, LBU Wood, whichever one of the names you want to come up with. But a pretty similar story to Enda. I was primarily just a streamer. I did a lot of invasion content, not so much dueling stuff. And then over the course of doing that for on and off, year and a half to 2 years, I eventually got asked to help commentate a 2v2 tournament. And a lot of people liked the way that I commentated and like the way that I would cast the fights. And then I just, from that point on, it was just a bunch of people, hey, you want to do this tournament? You want to be a part of this one? Stuff like that. Did a couple with Enda, and then I finally hosted my own. And what actually gave me the motivation to do a lot of the tournament stuff was Zonic Zero reached out to me and was like, hey, I want to organize a tournament. I'm not very good at casting. Nobody knows me on Twitch. Would you mind casting and streaming it? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. That's kind of where we found, you mentioned the organization side of things. That's where I kind of found the motivation and the inspiration rather to get to have somebody else be a large part of the tournament and not just have one person do everything. It's been made life a lot easier so far, and we're trying to figure out ways to do that in Elden Ring. But that's more
Mhm.
or less the story of me. Just an invader. I've been doing more as I do more tournament and get into that side of things. But by my week job, I'm a business manager at a car dealership. So I think that probably, being in sales and stuff probably helps with my ability to speak and things like that, which I'm sure is in turn where I can kind of pick up some of the casting and stuff that I do.
Yeah, that's cool. So two of us have management experience. Me personally, with my life, I try to stay away from management as far as possible. Yeah, give me the easy job. I don't like dealing with people. I'd rather stay away from that responsibility. I like the low stakes jobs. Um, a little more about myself. So I'm primarily a Dark Souls game PvP uploader. I've been playing Souls games since Demon Souls back in 2009. And like I said before, one of my primary influences for wanting to do tournament hosting was watching tournaments for Demon Souls hosted by the Japanese community years ago. So when Bloodborne came out and Sony, they had the Share Factory app out for PS4, I was able to edit my own videos and upload them to YouTube. I started out just doing like some fun videos for Bloodborne. Then I started doing build showcase videos, and then later
Air
on,
Factory is good.
it's pretty good compared to where it started 7 years ago or 9 years ago. It's a lot more robust now. It
Yeah,
has
they
a
did a lot of
lot more
updates.
features. They have another
Yeah.
big update coming in spring, so I'm looking forward to that. They haven't announced what's coming with it, but they told me that it's pretty big. What else? Yeah, so around 2016, me and a friend, we got together. We started a community for PS4 back when they still had communities. We called it Bloodborne Tournaments. And, over time, about like 2 months in, we got a good amount of people, about like just under 50. So we started hosting tournaments together, pretty low budget, no prize pools or anything. It was just mostly for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had like a low budget mic, just my PS5, PS4 headset. And yeah, over time we just kept doing tournaments. We started getting more people. We went from like 50 people all the way to 2,000 by the end of the life cycle of the community. And I hosted just over 20 tournaments. So like 8 for Bloodborne, and then 12 for Dark Souls 3. A couple of 2v2 tournaments included in that. And then just before the start of 2018, I decided to take a break. I handed off my community to Brena because I don't want to leave my community in the dust. And he pretty much took over the PlayStation tournament scene from there. So thank you to him for keeping the that community alive.
You got
And
it.
and then with the launch of Elden Ring, I decided to come out of retirement, start doing what I do best again, making build showcase videos, organizing tournaments, and just doing some fun stuff on the side. So the purpose of this podcast, I just decided to get like the best qualified people together to talk about certain aspects of Souls PvP, Elden Ring PvP. I guess to start, how do you guys feel about the PvP overall? Brenda, we'll start with you.
It's really fun. I could see the potential. There were a couple of tournaments. There was a solo of a 150 on Thursday and a 90 yesterday. And like we've all heard like a lot of complaints. We've heard complaints and praises, but it was really nice to like see that and see those things in action. And I feel like I can see the potential in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree wholeheartedly with Brena's sentiment there. I mean, we're at least a couple of patches away from kind of even knowing how the game is going to be. Like the high weapon art damage, some of those rounds in both of those tournaments over the last couple of days were like, if they hit 30 seconds, you were doing well. Like the sheer damage that can be output by like a pretty simple and straightforward build is pretty nuts. But I really seen the potential in the game, especially low level, because when you don't have the crazy weapon art damage, it's still high, but at least there's a bit of a back and forth. And I honestly, the big issue I'm having with it is just weapon art damage. Like, weapon art damage is the thing that I think is really holding the game back right now, and that it's a simple tweak for PvP to really bring out the rest of the game. Like, it was myself and Brena hosting the 90 tournament. I was really impressed watching a couple of streamers by Unids and Saratoga fighting. Those rounds, they were complicated. There was a lot going on. They
They're
were
amazing.
using full move sets, and all of the move sets that they were using were useful. So there's a great game in here. I think it just needs a
Yeah.
little bit of a polish, and I think we'll be away and ready to go.
That is a breath of fresh air compared to Dark Souls 3, because in Dark Souls 3 PvP, you mostly saw just running attacks or just R1 roll catches from like Karthus Curse Sword, the Washing Pole, and the Pontiff Knight Curse Sword. You didn't really see R2s being used at all. LB, give your thoughts on PvP.
Yeah. I'm gonna shadow Brena and Enda a little bit, or sorry, Echo rather, saying, and there's a lot of potential there. I think the biggest thing, like what Enda mentioned out, is just the Ash of War damage right now is just way too overtuned. I mean, you can get some of these Ashes of War to literally do over 2,000 damage, and that's 60 Vigor is 1,900 without any anything else to bump that HP up. So, like some of the damage that you see is just absolutely insane. So I think that's probably the first step, is just tuning
Mhm.
back some of that damage, because there's a lot of stuff in the game that you can't really see whether or not it's good. I've been doing a lot of duels with one of the NA duelists from Dark Souls 3, Value, and he's been using a setup with an offhand halberd and a main hand katana. And it sounds really bad, like when you first hear about it, considering all the other things in the game, shield poke, bleed, all these other things that you can be doing.
Mhm.
But anybody here who understands Value or has watched them play knows that they like to get backswings, and they found a way to get backswings in Elden Ring with this setup. And it's really cool to me to see these different setups that I wouldn't think to see, and I wouldn't expect to see, being used and at a really high level. So I think once we see some of these nerfs coming through with damage, once we see some of the reworks come through on things like how fast bleed builds up, the stun, the madness, the sleep, things like that, that are definitely affecting the game a little bit negatively. When we see that stuff get worked a little bit better, I think it's going to open up a lot of potential in the game. One of the things that I think is really cool is the ability to put different Ash of Wars on weapons. So you can have 2 or 3 different straight swords that have 3 different Ash of Wars, and they all are the same Crow Talon straight sword. And you can do really cool mix-ups with that, because somebody won't even realize that you swap to the other weapon, and then you have now a different Ash of War that you can approach them with. I think like you mentioned, in Dark Souls 3, especially near the end of Dark Souls 3 is kind of where I'll shed light on. We saw a lot of straight sword S stock and a lot of fast curve sword, and that was basically the meta for the last year and a half of Dark Souls 3, just based on tournament restrictions saying, hey, we aren't going to use Pontiff Knight curve sword, we aren't going to use some of these other things. And you saw the meta was basically the ability to reaction roll catch, the ability to backswing, and the ability to pressure from neutral. And that's those weapon setups did that exceptionally well. And I'm really almost refreshed to see that there is still neutral in this game, and you still have that kind of dance between each other. But with that, there's a lot of ways to approach that, as opposed to just outspacing and whiff punishing, because you don't get the stuns that you would get in the previous titles. You don't get a lot of that stuff, so it forces you to play aggressive to find those roll catches, because the roll catch doesn't stagger them anymore. They always have roll poise and stuff like that. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do in the game. And I think what Enda put it perfectly. We just need a couple, 2, 3, 4 patches before we can actually see what's going to happen with the PvP.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you with the Ash of War system. I feel that is the best change going from Dark Souls 3 to Elden Ring. The Ash of War system gives the player an unprecedented amount of freedom in terms of play style, being able to put any weapon art on your weapon. I think it's just such a good thing. And like so far, at least in the public matches, I do see that variety. And also dual wielding, something that we haven't seen since Dark Souls 2. That is returned, and seeing that being used, seeing 2 different weapons being used, and having the option of like 2 different weapon arts, it's such a great thing for variety, and I think that'll help us as hosts, because for me, one of the reasons why I stopped doing tournaments was because the meta just got too stale, and I got tired of seeing the same thing over and over again, seeing the same weapon win over and over again. So I'm hoping that won't be the case for Elden Ring PvP, and like we'll see mage builds be viable and actually win some tournaments.
With the
and
star
so-
spell that it is.
Yeah,
Oh,
mages are quite good right now, I think.
Yeah,
Stars of Ruin.
Yeah, that one needs some tuning. To be honest.
Because the 2 players start on both sides of the map, and you throw the bomb, and then the mage just starts casting immediately before
Yeah,
physical player can get to them. Like it's incredibly powerful.
yeah.
The ability to pressure from range and the ability to just insane high damage and the punishes when the melee player
It's
comes back
it's
comes in.
incredibly
It's
difficult.
rough.
It's
Rough.
incredibly difficult to avoid
Yeah.
because you're firing all that. But yeah, please, you were talking about them. You want to see mages? That would be good because I feel like mages were something that were maligned. Like we always banned like Magic Barrier and Great Magic Barrier to help promote build variety, but we still never saw mages. Like the only time that we got to see very many mage builds is when we did like the spammy caster style where everybody had to incorporate casting
Mhm.
into like a build and like throw a couple of spells, you know.
Yeah, I think it's funny the when you look at like casting in Dark Souls 3, the really the only two viable ways to play a caster on like an extremely high level. I know people that are really good at casting that would definitely very good at the game fundamentally and found cool ways to incorporate casting. When you're talking about a tournament with money on the line, like the only two viable ways of casting you saw was somebody using melee build, melee weapons, but having homing soul mass up, or they were using demon scar and just using fire surge to pressure, and it
Mhm.
actually led to both of those things usually being banned in most tournaments just
Yeah.
because of the play style that it promoted and stuff. So I'm really excited. I think, I mean, even like Stars of Ruin and some of that really overtuned stuff aside, I think mages have a lot of variety. Even like look at like a holy build or a faith build that's using like the bestial sling. It has really good poise break. It has really good chip, just to slowly chip your opponent down. It's fast. It's hard to react. Like we're gonna see a lot of people mixing those stuff in. I've seen some people do really cool stuff with the tail swipe. In I can't think in cant I think it's called incantation. There we go. So there's definitely a lot of potential for casting. There's a lot of potential for mages, and even if you look at like pure mage, pure casting builds, I actually do think that we'll see that in some of these higher end tournaments as the
Yep.
game continues to get tweaked and continues to get worked. Because there's just so much magic in the game. I mean, they definitely had their eyes on magic when they made this game.
You
It's no
guys.
harm as well. Sorry, excuse me.
I was just gonna say, you guys gave me a good segue to lead into the absence of casting weapons. Because like in Dark Souls 3, we had weapons like the Demon Scar that let you use an R1 slash and cast with R2, and we have none of that in Elden Ring. How do you guys feel about the absence of that, and how will that like affect caster builds?
I don't think they really need them in this game. It doesn't feel like it. They have so much variety when it comes to both Ashes of War that like scale with int, and as well as that they have a bunch of spells that like really punish aggression. You cannot punish a mage like even with you. It's like someone picks up a demon scar. You're not going to be able to pressure that. Like it's a curved sword. It's quick. In this game, it feels the same way because they have really high damage. Oh dear, pardon me.
Are you okay, Enda?
I it sounded like maybe his phone was ringing, but
Okay, then LB, I guess you
yeah,
can
I'll
continue
jump
from
in.
there.
I think one of the things that Enda was saying that I definitely agree with is that I actually think having weapons that are melee weapons, scaling off of intelligence, faith, etc., that have the ability to cast almost hinders casting as a whole. Because
Interesting.
as a caster, I need to decide if I'm going to use a melee weapon or not. When I have these hybrid weapons that use the stats that I use to cast and do stuff, I don't really have to make that sacrifice. I don't really have to think about it. And especially a weapon like Demon Scar is just so incredibly good, and it was in Dark Souls 3 that it just led perfect into a specific style of play style of play that was very hard to get around. And one of the things I've noticed in fighting some of the mage builds is that they have a lot of that utility strictly from a casting standpoint. Like, yeah, we've all seen the mage with Moonveil on their hip, but even looking aside from that, like the carrion slicer hits extremely hard. It has a dagger move set. There's a lot of really cool stuff I think we can see that mages can even play melee without having to use melee weapons. And they still have some of those bigger hitting items, those bigger, slower spells and sorceries and cantrins, etc., that can do a lot of that stuff.
Mhm. Sorry, I was just trying to unmute my mic. Brenna, would you like to add on to that?
I think you're right. When you said that this game, they definitely put a lot of magic. They put a whole lot of. The magic is more diverse than the weapons. Like once again, we've got like all these great swords that have like the same moveset and similar for like the curved swords and the katanas and stuff like that. But the magic definitely got like a lot of love. I haven't delved too much into that. That was something I was gonna start doing after this tournament. Start looking into more things. I don't think that I actually know everything that there is in the game, so it's kind of nice to see that there's so much variety. I feel
So,
like it's kind of like a throwback to Dark Souls 2. A lot of the stuff that they did, like I know Demon Scars was in DS3, but that was like we had that in DS2 with like weapons that could cast spells, and the spells in DS2 were just incredible. Like a lot of variety there.
so would you guys say that like if they were to add casting weapons back into Elden Ring, like with DLC, would that be like an unnecessary buff to casters? Like, do they really not need it at all?
I think it would be, yeah. And like I said, I almost personally, I kind of feel like weapons that can cast. Typically, I feel like they almost hinder the variety that you can see with a mage build and the different things that because like I said, as a mage, they almost have to choose if they're going to use melee, and if they're going to use melee, then they have to get they're figuring out how to infuse their weapons. They have to raise their strength or dex to get to those places that they need, in order to use those weapons. Whereas now it's just something that they can have in their arsenal and their toolkit, and it can allow them to do a lot of really cool things. So I don't think it would necessarily be an unnecessary buff. It depends on what they actually do with magic and mind scaling and all that stuff to see whether or not it would be a buff per se. But I kind of like that it's not there. I think it opens a door to a lot more creative play style that can be just as good, if not better.
Hmm. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. With sorcery, I don't think it needs it right now because of how powerful Carrying Slicer is. I don't know if I can say the same about incantations though, because incantations there's no poise casting like in Dark Souls 3, and the casting speed for incantations is still pretty slow, and I see them get interrupted all the time.
I think the incantations add utility. They're kind of like weapon arts in that sense. You're using them for like cheeky roll catches. That bestial sling we seen come out in like some
Hmm.
pretty high level duels. Myself and LB in that fight club we ran. Like it has utility, but it's not quite going to be the main. It's not going to be the main event, if you will, like mages are. I think it's going to be something that someone's going to have in their back pocket in case they ever
Hmm.
need it. I would imagine that would be my. That's the difference, I suppose, between the two.
I mean, I would like to see some of them have their casting speed increase, like the regular Thunderbolt. What's it called? Hone Bolt. It's actually slower than its weapon art variant. It's like twice the casting time, but same damage, which doesn't make any sense to me. Um, so just a couple of tweaks here and there with some of the spells I think, would be necessary and
Yeah,
good.
I would actually agree with that a little bit. One of the things that I've noticed from incantations, with the exception of like the beast, like most of the bestial stuff is actually really good. You have like the one that throws the claw out, the one that hits the ground and the little claws come out around you. You have the bestial sling. Like all those have a lot of utility. They're pretty quick casting times, and they do a pretty decent damage for what they are and what they cost. The biggest thing that I've noticed is a lot of what would be like the miracle equivalents of that this game would have as far as those incants go is I see a lot of buffs. There's the lightning bolstering buff on your body. You can get regeneration buffs. You can get AR buffs and all this other stuff. Like a lot of
Hmm.
the sacred oath style is what I see the incantations being, with the exception of that bestial tree. Um, and I think that's a healthy thing for the game as a whole. If you look at like the people running through with PVE and their friends, or they want to get through on their own in multiple new game cycles, having those buffs, having those incantations are awesome. But from a strictly PvP and even more strictly tournament setting, I don't know if we're going to see a lot of that use. I would say most of the bestial stuff and maybe like some of the the Crucible Knight things that you can, some of those incantations that you can get, like the Tail Swipe and the Fire Breath and stuff like that, we might see more use of. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that the Asher Wars are just better. I mean, and that's honestly even some of the miracle, so the sorceries, sorry, the Asher Wars versions are just better. Like look at Glintstone Pebble. That you get a follow up of your thrust weapon. Like it's just so much stronger than the sorcery version of it. So I don't know if that is something that we'll see change if and when they nerf the Ash of Wars and the system that they impose with that. It might encourage people to want to do more of the sorcery or the incantation versions of those Ashes of War. But yeah, I think that probably just ties into Asher Wars just being way too good right now.
Yeah, they're definitely too good to a fault. And that kind of leads into my next segue. The absence of poise casting, good or bad, and why? Good or bad, and why? Brena, you first.
Good. Well, poise casting, I always thought that was like kind of like a complicated issue. Like I talked to new pianists and mentioned to like a couple of the other tournament hosts at one time that I just felt like for us in the game, like everything has a place, but that doesn't mean that everything has a place in competitive PvP or has a place in the tournaments because they need to be balanced. I always felt like poise casting opened up the window for situations to happen that could be hard to anticipate but didn't really belong in a tournament. Like one example is like when we started limiting perseverance, and like with Cestus you purrs and then you switch your weapon to like something faster and you can pressure people. Like we started doing that and that became something that was relatively common to see in tournaments. Like everybody started doing this, right? Poise casting is just another version of the same thing. You're pursing and then you're getting like a follow-up action, like you're having a defensive and being able to be offensive at the same time. And then there's like tricky stuff with like you don't like lightning arrow poise cast is like one of the most insanely powerful things in Dark Souls 3. But there's like I'm trying to remember the lightning slam. Not the
Lightning stake.
slot. Like the lightning stake. If you poise cast lightning stake, you can regular cast lightning arrow right after that. But you get a glitch where your lightning arrow is poise cast.
Wait, really?
I did not know that.
What?
Yeah, I never actually tested that.
Yeah. I would always
never
just swing
thought it was,
R1s
as
after
many
landing
people
lightning
would.
stake.
So there's just a combination of like all of this like weird glitches you get, and then like we're already limiting purrs. Like, so why are we allowing people to have as many poise casts, which is basically like another version of perseverance?
Well,
You know,
to play the devil's advocate, I feel
it just
like it
seemed
was
to me like
necessary
it
to have
was.
it because like incantations or not incantations, miracles were just like kind of too slow and they're just easy to be interrupted. So I feel like that's why he needed it. But I do agree, like in some
Maybe.
situations it was too powerful. Like lightning stake, you can just one shot people with it.
Yeah, I think lightning arrow is a really good one that Brenna brought up. It really, I mean, if you get somebody that's playing lightning arrow Corbian, good luck. You can't pressure them. You very hard to counter pressure them or counter aggress them. And all they have to do, if they really want, they can just sit there and hold lightning arrow. And there's not a lot that you can do. You can lightning infuse, your Lothric shield and get really really good defense against it, and then all they have to do is weapon art with Corvian, and you're like, oh, okay. I guess that's that idea is out the window now, right? So lightning arrow is definitely a problem with poise casting. One of the things I think this game has, the reason that we probably don't have poise casting is because passive poise exists, and you can still poise cast to an extent with passive poise. And you can trade spells and trade incantations with your passive poise in the same way that you could on a melee build. The tricky part is getting the poise on that build. But I mean, if you look at like any of the poise breakpoints, you don't actually need hyper armor for pretty much all of them. Just it's passive poise, right? Just by having the poise, you can walk through certain attacks. And I think we'll see a lot of that used with different, incantations, different sorceries and stuff that allows them to just get their cast off with not being interrupted. Yeah, they take damage, but they would have taken damage with poise casting as well, right? So I think we do still have poise casting. It's just a different, much like
It's
a
a
lot of
different
things from Dark
kind.
Souls 3 to Elden Ring. It's just different. It's poise casting based off of your poise value and your passive poise, and not poise casting based off of holding something that would give you the equivalent of perseverance or something like that.
Yeah, I always use poise casting on a build with like no armor, very light armor, light on stamina and vigor. So I still took a lot of damage while poise casting, so I guess that's why in my mind it felt more balanced. But to you, so you'd say the absence of poise casting is good overall.
I would say that. Yeah.
Okay, and Enda?
The removal of poise casting,
Yeah, you say it's a
yeah,
good
you
thing or bad thing
really
that.
don't. Oh, it's a really good thing. Get rid of
Okay.
it. It's like, honest to goodness, if you have something that breaks the flow of play, something breaks the flow of play, like, and it interrupts like the flow of a fight, you don't want that. You want to get rid of it as soon as you can. You want to encourage fundamentals in all aspects of play is really, and reward
Mhm.
people who've like played that well. If they're not rewarding the fundamentals, I don't. And if the rule set doesn't reward fundamentals of a given tournament, especially seeing as we do have control over what is and isn't played, I think get rid of it. I don't see any utility in it.
Something that's interesting to see after all of these years, like you're talking about poise casting, like I'd have to say from what I saw, the best 3 casters on Dark Souls 3 on any platform were probably Dark Matter, Asato Venheim, and Diana,
Mm-hmm.
the one. So, and none of those 3 used poise cast.
Mm-hmm.
That's because miracle builds were shit, but
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So like I mean, it's such a busted thing, but luckily they didn't open the door any more than they did on it.
Yeah.
So what we got out of casters were,
Okay.
magic and pyro.
Yeah.
You didn't
I think I would.
you didn't see faith
I think I would put
used.
homing soul mass off stock in the same category as poise cast lightning arrow.
Kind of the same. Unfortunately, it
I
kind
think
of
because
falls in the same
for the same
bracket.
reasons, and I think it's just that the homing soul mass is just better. And I'm nothing against Diana, of course. I think Diana's a very good player, and I don't mean to take away from her play style or anything like that. But I think you're looking at a pretty similar setup. It's just different, a different way of doing it. With homing soul mass, it's extremely hard to pressure that. It's extremely hard to punish that, especially if they're also running an S stock God Hearts or both. If they cast them to swap to straight sword S stock, like they have one of the best setups in the game, and now they also just have the ability that you can't really aggress them without forcing you to either roll, take chip damage, or something on those lines that they can get pressure off of. And poise casting kind of did the same thing. They can just sit there and hold it, and you can't really move into it. I think we didn't see it a lot, at least by the time that I had gotten around to doing tournaments, because even though I've been in the community since like 2019, I didn't actually do tournaments until really 2021. So by that time, it was kind of standard that that like homie soul mass was banned, that fire surge was banned, that a lot of those other stuff was already banned. So I never got to see people trying to run it in a tournament, but I did see it a lot in just like random duels. I would see it all the time at Pontiff of just if somebody was losing and they were on the build that could poise cast lightning arrow, they would just hold the lightning arrow, and it was like, okay, well now this fight was a fun fluid fight, and now it's just me trying to figure out a way to get around their broken / cheesy setup. And I think like Enda, you had mentioned, we have the ability to limit that stuff, which I think is really healthy for the tournament scene. And ideally, we won't be limiting anything in Elden Ring, right? If the game is actually balanced to the point where everything has a place. But it may have been a situation, Brenna, where you saw like the homing soul mass style of play just because realistically it was probably better to use homing soul mass than that, and also maybe Diana disliked that. But I think they're probably close to being in the same category in terms of the way the dynamic that they can change.
They definitely interrupt the style of play in a very similar manner, I would say, albeit like different scales. One is one encourages avoidant gameplay, the other like is trying to constantly have trades and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
Go
carry on.
ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Literally that was pretty much all I have to say. It's like if you
Oh,
interrupt
okay.
the style of play, and it's in the game, you should probably have it on a rule set that it's no longer allowed. That would be that's my general vibe anyway.
Yeah. So on that note, before we move on, I agree. When it comes to like stressing fundamentals and anything that interrupts that should be removed. So overall, is it good that poise casting is gone? I'd say yes. One of the things I definitely don't miss is seeing people poise cast heals in public matches. That was the most annoying thing to me. Because like you have someone like they would already have Tears of Denial on, but then you drop them down to like no health, and then they'll poise cast Great Heal, and they get it off, and now like you're just back to square one. So I definitely don't miss that. I forget what it's called.
Projected
Projected
heal,
heal.
yeah, the poise cast projected heal murky builds, and then poise casting Darkblade on it. I think I didn't even think of that side of it, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, poise casting heals is broken, and but I do still miss it just because I feel like some incantations they do need either poise casting or they need a speed buff, and I guess maybe a speed buff would be easier. Seeing poise casting on like the dragon spells would probably be a little too broken.
That
Um,
would be hilarious. I don't know what to say.
it would be hilarious. It would be hilarious, but competitively, it would be a little overtuned to say the least.
Just a smidge.
A
That's all,
smidge.
man.
So I'm segueing off of that. So to me, the main problem with PvP, besides weapon art damage, because I feel like in the short term, weapon art damage that's a really easy fix. I think the main problem with Elden Ring as it is more fundamental, and that would be the poise overall. Bringing back passive poise from Dark Souls 1, I feel doing that was just a mistake. I feel like you were saying with poise casting, how it takes away from the fundamentals of fights and it interrupts the flow of fights. I feel like regular passive poise does the same thing. Um, and I've thought of ways of like how they can possibly fix it. But before I move on to that, what would you guys say about poise and how it is right now? Brenda, starting with you.
I didn't play Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls PvP, so I like kind of finagled with Bloodborne, so that was like my first experience, and then Dark Souls 2 and then Dark Souls 3. So actually PvPing on here is my first experience with Poise. I feel like I don't really understand it as well as like some other people do. I did hear someone recently, Castle in the Sky, he referred to something called counting poise, and I hadn't heard of that or like thought of that before. So I'm was going to I just heard this like 2 days ago. And then so I was going to look more into this, but I've done probably like 1,000 invasions at this point. I mean, and I'd have to say it's a lot different. Like, I played Dark Souls 3 for a long time. Like, you have to like retrain yourself. Like, the game is different, so you can't do some of the same things. And then in addition to that, like the movements and some of the things, but also there's no two-hit combo anymore because of the passive poise unless you do certain things like you use sleep, or there's like a handful of combos in here like how Bloodborne is, which is like one hit or in like
Mm-hmm.
a handful. But I've heard a lot of people react negatively to it, and I just feel like I just don't want to really do that. Like I try to be like really positive about the game. I don't want to have a negative or put out any negative energy about it. So for me, I've just played it and dug in there, and I mean it's different, but it's still fun. I mean, I haven't really dueled that much. That's going to be something
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start doing like this weekend and like next week. But out of like
Mm-hmm.
the like 1,000 invasions I've had, I'd have to say that the game is fun. It is different, but I mean, we can take it for what it is, which would be like an important thing, and just roll with it and have fun with it. Or if people don't like it, then they're gonna, I mean, go back to Dark Souls 3, like I've heard a lot of people say recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for some situations, it is nice to have it back again. But at least to me, overall, having the experience I have with the previous games and seeing it how it's playing out in competitive duels, I feel like some changes do need to be made. LBU, would you like to give your thoughts?
Yeah. So passive poise from a I mean, honestly, just from a game fundamental standpoint, I personally cannot see why they want to have it. However, I agree with Brenna that we shouldn't just bash the system into the ground. That it's in the game, and we kind of need to learn how to play with it. So I'll give it from more that perspective and how I feel on passive poise. One of the biggest issues that I have with passive poise are what the poise breaks are and how extremely attainable those poise breaks it is to reach those poise breaks. So, for example, you take a look at power stance weapons. If you have a power stance weapon, if you have a poise break of 61 or higher, so if your natural poise armor is if your poise has natural sorry your armor has natural poise of 61 or higher, you can walk through the first set of attacks there. Um, And that creates, situations where you can create a trade heavy meta, and not so much a fundamental aspect of it. That being said, though, a lot of people didn't like the way the fundamentals of, like, for example, Dark Souls 3 worked, because again, you ran into like stuff like fast curve sword and just these really fast
Mhm.
weapons, straight sword, S stock, sword and board, things like that. That definitely rewarded pure fundamental play, but it was less fun for people to casually play it, because they would just get roll caught to death, And though I
Mhm.
think that'll still be a thing in Elden Ring, I do think that passive poise helps those players, and kind of offers, a nice little push to them, to where they have the ability to just trade with things as long as they have the right poise break. Where it becomes an issue for me is, like I said, how attainable it is, because when you look at any type of competitive scene, well, of course you're going to be looking at really good players, possibly some of the best in the world, if not all the best in the world, coming together to compete. And what are those players understand the game extremely well, and what they're going to be doing is using every single advantage they can get. And passive poise, being as attainable as it is, definitely can give you huge
Mhm.
advantages, and it can create, like I said, just this super trade heavy meta. And one of the things that I think is interesting with it is, keeping track of poise health, and knowing that, okay, this person has this weapon, I can tank their L1 twice before my poise breaks. So I can go in, I can trade with them, I can hit again and trade, and then I have to get out. And I think it does still give you like a knowledge check, that we saw in some previous, the previous titles. There's every one of the FromSoft games has a knowledge check in PvP for one form or
Mhm.
another. And I think passive poise definitely does still have that knowledge check, that you have to know what your poise health is. You have to keep track of that stuff and know how many hits you can take. So there is still outplay there. There is still, fundamentals to be had, and knowledge checks there. But it doesn't encourage them as well as the other titles have. So, like I said, from a personal standpoint, from like, I just want to play video games, I can't find one good reason why I would want to have it in the game. However, from, realizing it's in the game, knowing that it's never going to go anywhere, and how it's important to learn, I can see, areas where it can create fun situations. And I'll be honest, if I'm fighting somebody that's using a halberd, the first thing I'm doing is rearranging my armor and stuff to get to 94 poise, because then I know I can go through their R1, right, and I can
Mhm.
continue to play in a certain way. And if I'm using a weapon that can poise break on trade, I can take the trade and poise through it, and then poise break them, with the trade. So, for example, something like Glintstone Pebble, I'll mention, like, if I'm fighting a halberd and I want to use that type of Ash of War, perfect. I got to get to the poise break, and then I can go through it. So there's still knowledge checks, and there's still things there. And even if they look at it from a katana standpoint, if I know the weapon R2 will break their poise, I just need to be able to trade with them, and poise does let me do that. So it does give the opportunity to still, have knowledge checks there. But yeah, just how attainable it is definitely the biggest issue, because it's so easy to get to the poise
Mhm.
breaks, to just walk through so many things in the game. I mean, if you went to, the Academy Gate right now at 125 and just grabbed a random sign, I would actually bet money that within the first 5 duels, you would fight somebody in full bull go with power stance naginatas, because that,
Mhm. You're
like,
not wrong.
yeah,
You're not
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, and because 133 poise, there's a very few select things in the game that can actually go through that and trade with that.
Mhm.
And yeah, so you're looking at, you have such a huge advantage just by having that on your build, to somebody who maybe only wants to run 61 poise because they want to have fun with other stuff, and it just really creates a poise heavy meta. And the problem that I have with a poise heavy meta is it definitely looks away from fundamentals. It does not,
Mhm.
reward you for playing fundamental. It does still reward knowledge checks. It does still reward, you have to know somebody's going to attack you to get the trade, right? But there's just so much that you can do with poise in this game, that I definitely don't like how attainable it is. And that, I think that's where I'll put my complaint with passive poise, is how easy it is to reach what you need to get to that point where realistically the PvP stops working.
Mhm. Yeah, well
Stop
said.
being
Well
so
articulated.
so easy to agree with. God
Yeah, I was gonna say,
damn it. Ah.
Endo, would you like to give your thoughts? I feel like Labu said everything.
I think I do understand why they brought it in. I've had a couple of conversations with the streamer Soviet Spaceship, and it's basically revolved around why did they put it in? Well, it's to stop curved swords and daggers being so dominant in DS3. That's more or less why they did it. They
Mhm.
can't figure out to make those weapons quick, powerful, and not like meta defining, high damage notwithstanding. So they just added that you can basically tank through them. I think that's more or less why they've decided to bring it in. As for a decision whether I love it or hate it, I'm kind of indifferent on it, to be honest with you. Like if they took it out tomorrow, the game, I don't know if the game would be better or worse. It'd be just a roll catch meta then from very fast weapons. We go right back to DS3 again. We've already been there. We had a good few years of it. I think.
Cross
Honest to
knocking
God,
get better.
yeah. Well, I mean, they get even better. Yeah, anything that can effectively roll catch. Yeah, it is basically going to be the meta because there's no roll poise anymore. So it's like it's all, yeah. I don't know. As for how can we? Because again, we as TOs have the ability to like change it. I think Brena, in your initial video just before Elden Ring dropped, you said it's like we can just limit poise.
I
Do a
taught
quick check.
on February 16th. I made a video and I postulated every possible ban that a tournament for Elden Ring could have based on every Souls and Bloodborne tournament and like what we saw like come out of those. And there was limiting poise and then also banning certain shields.
Yeah, and that's what we can do. I mean, at least in competitive play. As for out in the wild at the academy gate or whatever, of course you're never going to have control over that. But
Yeah.
setting the culture and setting the tone for like, you should be aiming for a lower poise around this level is acceptable. I think people will eventually kind of follow it, especially those with their finger on the pulse of how the tourney in the competitive scene is going. Like you saw an occasional random using PK or using Murky in DS3, but not everyone did, even though those were probably the most optimal setups in the last couple of years of the game, because it was almost a faux pas to pull Murky. You know, people just didn't do it. It was considered rude, and I think having full bull goats should be kind of put in that same kind of bracket because it does break the game. Really, really high poise does break the game. It's just there's very little you could do about it. I had the pleasure of fighting a high poise mage earlier, and it was how do we keep this PG-13? It was an experience. Let's put it
Well said.
yeah, and there's very little you can do. So
Well,
I
I mean,
want to say that one of the number one complaints that I see since we're talking about poise is people are the complaint in relation to this is that we made so much movement going from Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 to go through Bloodborne, DS2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3. Like we're all the way to the point that we are. Like players are upset that they feel like we've taken a step back. A lot of people wanted what we had in Dark Souls 3 and they wanted that to be expanded on, with like the Ashes of War and then like, okay, the perfumes and like all these crazy magics and stuff like that. So primarily I feel like players feel like we went back in time instead of forward in time.
I definitely get that.
Just really one last thing. And all that wrapped together, the issue is that people feel like there isn't any momentum in fights. Like Enda and I are fighting, and in Elden Ring, if I hit him once, like we reset. So there isn't really, there is momentum because you can kind of have somebody at less life and you could have a lot life and they're in like a worser position than you. But like in Dark Souls 3, there was a lot more momentum. Like LBU's got a curved sword. He's got me on the ropes. He's chopping me up. Like I can't get away. He's doing a couple combos. I'm scrambling. Okay. And then I'm dead. Like you're not going to really get that same effect with Elden Ring. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely right. Just going back to Dark Souls 1 PvP and not making like any significant alterations with it like Dark Souls 3 did was just, one, it was just lazy, and two is, yeah, it was a step backwards, a full step backwards. Dark Souls 3's system wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction because poise was basically limited to just heavy weapons, as it should be. But it wasn't perfect, and curved swords, daggers, they were still dominating the meta. So clearly we can't not have poise to some degree. Like it has to exist. It has to exist for larger weapons to be viable. But the current system as it is right now, it can't stay because it does take away from the fundamentals of PvP. Because you look at the current meta right now, what is the meta? Full bull goat armor, dual wield spears with frost and bleed on them. You're taking trades on purpose. You're doing counter damage. You're doing instant bleed, instant frost, and the fights are over in 2 hits, in some cases 1 hit. So the current system as is now, that can't stay either. So my suggestion for fixing poise is to remove poise values from armors and only have it on the weapons themselves. So for like the dagger classes, the curved sword classes, they would have less poise. And the great swords, the colossal weapons, they would have high poise. And I think that would be a good step, a good compromise where passive poise can still exist, but it's exclusive to the large slow weapons where they belong. So, what do you guys think about that idea?
I think that's a really interesting take, actually, because one of the things that I was going to mention in in the conversation that we've been having about poise is that the biggest problem with passive poise, I think I thought of this when you said it has to exist, is that if it exists, the fast weapons are still just better.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at Dark Souls 3, the fast weapons are better because they're fast, they're hard to react to, and they can roll catch and pressure. Okay, so if you have passive poise, I can't roll catch you, but I can still aggress you, I can still pressure you, I can still force trades, I can still do these things. So I actually think adding it to the weapon would be really interesting, and I could definitely see it being something good. What would worry me is if you could like put the weapon on your back and then have
You could
a
stack
have a
poise.
dagger out if you still get poise, and stuff like that
Yeah,
would definitely. But I mean, that would be balanced stuff if they implemented that system. That definitely could happen, and they could balance and do stuff like
yeah,
that. I think that's a really good take, actually.
yeah. I'm glad you brought that
One of
up.
the things that I would look at. Oh, and I was just gonna say one of the things that I would look at from a balance standpoint with poise is for them to increase the equip load of things that
Mm-hmm.
have the super high poise. So where
Mm-hmm.
you are forced to not really do damage. Yeah, you can walk through stuff and you can trade, but
Mm-hmm.
the trade is about the same as if you instead had lower weight armor and more dexterity on your spear, right? If they change how that works, or if they just flat out make the poise values harder to get to, or increase what the poise breakpoints are. Yeah, you can have 100, you can have 110 poise, but 110 poise only gets you through the power stance weapons, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple different ways that they could do it in terms of still making stuff viable, because hyper armor does still exist on those colossal weapons.
Mm-hmm.
You still get hyper armor on great swords and colossal weapons and things along those lines. It's a very different system from what we saw in some of the previous titles.
Mm-hmm. I like that you brought up like just having like if you were to implement my idea, having the weapon on your back to get poise. Just to expand on that idea, the way I would have it set up is that the poise would only be active when it's equipped in your right hand. So that way, only when you're using that weapon would you get poise. So you can't just simply have it on your back and still get the effect.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
definitely balances you could put in for that, 100%.
yeah. Enda.
How would I fix the poise system? Or
Yeah. I mean, what do you think of my idea? And yeah, if and what would you do?
oh man, it's a rough one because trying to trying to balance what their intentions were with the poise, which is to I know you can still pressure with the you get pressure, you get native pressure by having a light weapon that moves quickly, that can do a reasonable amount of damage, obviously. But taking away the stun and forcing those weapons to have to trade with something is a pretty good idea. Honestly, I just increase the amount of poise damage most weapons do across the board. That kind of deals with the issue because they don't do enough. Like if you're tanking a great sword hit, right? Let's say for
Mm-hmm.
instance, like someone does a charge door two at you and it doesn't poise break you from a great sword. There's something wrong there. Something's not working properly. Or even just like an R1 off a great sword or something like that. That's not quite a colossal weapon. It's not an ultra. I think just flat out increasing the poise damage across the board like deals with that issue. You still need to have, as Brenna pointed out earlier, that concept of like counting, the poise counting, and you can kind of guess that based off of what
Mm-hmm.
they're wearing. It's like, okay, this guy is probably over 100. I need to give him 2 or 3 R1s from a straight sword in order to break his poise, or I need one
Mm-hmm.
R1 off a halberd to break his poise. But what I think the elephant in the room is that bloody ring,
The bull goat
the
ring.
Bulgo talisman.
Yeah.
That is, Why?
I think 33% more poise is fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Man, why? That boggles my mind. Why they thought that was a good idea? Because there's no way for you to recognize it. There's no like, or it doesn't give off an aura. There's no indication that okay, they're wearing this ring. You just kind of have to. Unfortunately, you have to assume they're wearing the ring. It's that powerful.
Yeah, I
Or
think.
sorry, the
Yeah.
talisman. Sorry, excuse me.
Right, yeah, the talisman. I think, not to cut you off, but I think one of the things that I've noticed with the Bulgo talisman that I actually kind of like about it is that I can get 61 points and have like very light armor that looks good that I like. Like I can still play Fashion Souls and have a poise break that gets me through the power stance stuff, right? Like I can't trade with halberds and stuff. I can't do a lot of the things. But the problem with it is that, like you said, you get to a point where something's not working correctly.
Yeah.
And honestly, so if you look at like poise breaks, 113 poise gets you through a two-handed halberd R1, or maybe that's an R2. Now it's a two-handed halberd R1 is 113 poise. I think it's 121 poise to get through a greatsword R1. If the talisman's not in the game, those poise breaks are not reachable.
Yep.
Um. Yeah. So, and your suggestion is more just change what's already there. Just increase poise damage for weapons, which
Yeah.
it wouldn't be a fundamental change like what I'm suggesting, where
I
they would
don't
have to change the whole
yeah.
system. Yeah.
I don't mind having it there. I don't mind having poise there. It's not enough of an issue for me to like throw it out, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I see what they were going for. And honest to goodness, like, yeah, I don't know. I think just like making it less useful or even forcing you to have to use the ring if you want to take advantage of that maybe might be the way to go.
Yeah.
But as
Well,
is, it's not functional.
Yeah, I feel like the one counter to that is that you're still getting passive poise on quicker weapons. Like you can still have people with the curved swords and the twin spears taking through hits and doing massive damage. Which is why like I kind of prefer my idea of just only having the poise available to heavier weapons. I feel like that would address the issue more. Because like majority of the fights in the game right now, as they are, the non-poised player, they have to play very passively. They have to just run in circles, just run away from their opponent, wait for them to have an opening, go in with the running R2 or running R1, come out, go back in with the running R2, come out, and it's just like watching is just not fun. And like for the person that has the poise, they could pretty much be mindless, just like go in and try to take a trade, and the other players just being very passive. So I feel like even if they were to like increase the poise damage, for most fights, like that would still be the gameplay that you'd see. Whereas
Yeah.
if it's only limited to heavy weapons, you'd only see that style of play for heavier weapons. But because they're slower, like non-poised builds, they can still be aggressive and just like get their hits in during like mid startup or during recovery.
Yeah, I guess maybe. The only thing I can say is with poise as is, especially when you see this this power stance double saber like bull goat like hobbling towards you at high speed, like you have a fair idea of what they're gonna do, right? They are literally just going to I am going to running L1 at you over and over again, tank through your hits and then kind of dab and disappear into the sunset with victory, right? That's more or less what their game plan is. That's still gameable. You can still punish their advances. It demands that you have to play a certain way against it, which is using avoidant gameplay basically,
Yeah.
which is a problem. But if you have higher poise damage, and they do decide to play that mindlessly, you know, I still feel that like that's still gameable. You can still do that. I still think my suggestion is instead of getting rid of it, just increase the poise damage, and they're going to get clipped eventually on their way in and go for a nasty trade, and they are roll caught to death. Ideally, that's like the big brain play.
Yeah.
Maybe you could be right. Maybe I can definitely see it. It is annoying to deal with right now, but you know their strategy.
Yeah.
They have one game, and you can kind of work your way around that. I feel that that's a mind game situation then within the mechanics rather than just poison in and of itself, because they do that anyway. They'd just be quicker to roll out.
Yeah. And also in terms of what we can expect from FromSoft and what they'll do, your suggestion is more realistic just because it's the easiest thing to do. Instead of having to do like overhauls to their system, they can just increase values. That's what they're good at. That's just the easiest, the path of least resistance, as they say.
Yeah. I do have just one interesting form of, I think we'll bring up an interesting topic while we're on this. So Knight, this question is more directed to you, but obviously I definitely want to hear everybody's take on it. If they had a system where passive poise was only there when you are fighting some of the, colossal greatsword style weapons, would you still see those weapons used, or would you still see people using things like curved swords and straight swords and S stocks and things like that? Because at a fundamental level of play, those are still just stronger.
Hmm. Well, I think for colossal weapons, they need it only because of their speed. Their movesets are pretty telegraphed, they're pretty easy to avoid. I think people would still use the smaller, faster weapons because of speed. Like for some weapons like spears, you can use their range to just like zone out your opponent, use like their running R1s to counter people who are using like big great swords. Uh, but like for colossal weapons, they don't have to worry about being roll caught as much by curved swords. They don't have to worry about being interrupted as much by curved swords. So they can go in and make their trades and just like play those weapons with more confidence. So I feel like limiting passive poise to just the heavier weapons would be the best compromise. Um, but it's something that would actually have to be done and experimented with. I could be completely wrong. Like they could do this, and then it still ends up being a mess. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's an idea that's worth looking into.
No, I agree entirely. I think it's a really cool idea, and I would actually like to see like what the game would play. The only thing that I fear of doing that system is that still nobody uses Uggs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because we're thinking about a
Well,
DS3 Uggs. Because remember, that poke, that crouch poke, oh my
yes.
word, does that come out quick. That really comes out quick. And basically, that's the entire Uggs playstyle now. Is set up the poke, and then everything else after that is a roll catch. Sometimes with the poke again. If you
Mm-hmm.
like, poise on a great sword isn't even. I mean, technically it's necessary, but with the speed of that, it basically puts it on par with everything
Mm-hmm.
else. So I think we're looking at this with DS3 goggles rather than looking at it through ER goggles. I think there's still a place for Uggs in this game,
Yeah.
with or without like a hyper armor equivalent, as Knight was suggesting.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's just something to keep in mind.
going back to LB's question, would you still see great swords? I mean, you look at least public matches right now at the academy. Do you see ultra great swords? Not really.
All the time.
People.
I see them all the time, and I get scared when I see them. That's pretty much the way, because it's like, oh, this person might actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
At least in
and
my
then they
experience on
crouch.
PS5, I mainly see people use the poise for like dual wielding spears or dual wielding heavy rapiers. I don't really see ultra great swords that much, even with the current poise system. So I feel like at least my suggestion, it would help
The damage isn't
ultra
that
weapons
great.
be
A lot of
used that
people are
much.
complaining about the damage on the ultra great swords and ultras and stuff like that. Like I think it's like doesn't like a spear have more damage.
Yeah,
I don't get
they
right.
don't have counter damage.
They need to like readjust some of the like damages too. It might help.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I yeah, I definitely agree with that because with some weapons you got like dual wielding curved swords, you can proc bleed faster, you can proc frost faster. With spears and rapiers, you have counter damage, so you actually end up out damaging colossal weapons,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't make any sense. So yeah,
Yeah, and
I agree with
yeah.
the damage point.
I would think that that's just a balancing issue. Like, if we just consider it like, let's pretend damage numbers don't really exist here. There's no reason why someone shouldn't use an ultra. The only reason I can see is it's not quite as good in a roll catch because it loses that forward momentum that those power stance rapiers or those power stance curve swords have. And that would be a reason why I wouldn't do it. Or even a twin spear. They all have very, very clear forward momentum in their moveset, particularly the running L1s, which is why people are
Mm-hmm.
using them, because we haven't figured out that you need to roll in on that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
that's us figuring out the game as an issue more so than anything else. But they're good for roll catching, and Uggs doesn't really have that option on its own. So that's
I
something to
have a
consider as well.
question based off of that. Should a colossal weapon that does the damage that it do have the ability to reaction roll catch?
Good question.
Ooh.
I would say no. Like if it with the current damage, and like if we were to buff it, like we're suggesting, like having the ability to roll catch would be too strong. Because I feel like that was the case in Dark Souls 3 with the ultra weapons that could poke. Like it was too strong. It would just two shot you.
So I guess the reason that I mainly asked
Mm.
that is because if you look at poke Uggs right now, what is everybody doing? Well, they're crouching and they're pressing R1, right? They're rolling or they're quick stepping or they're blood stepping and they're pressing R1, like because the poke is just there. That's the big thing, and people will still mix it up. I've seen a lot of like you can crouch, and if you press L1, if you're two-handed weapon, you press L1 and you block, it'll pull you out of crouch. So you can press L1 to kind of bait a roll and Q an R1, and it will catch them, right? So there's a lot of different counterplay that you can do, and I do think that Uggs needed something to be viable
Yep.
because even
Yeah.
and genuinely I don't think that if you took away passive poise and only gave it to ultra great swords, I don't think you would see it. I think if you'd see the same thing as you see in Dark Souls 3. And the reason I think that is because right now, even with 133 poise, you aren't going to poise through a colossal R1, to my knowledge.
Mhm.
You aren't going to be able, like, you're taking trades off of hoping that you get the counter in by the time they hit you. And I could be wrong in that. I just don't think that there is a poise break in the game that can get through them in what I've seen in the testing I've done, but I definitely could have missed something somewhere. So I think that's one of the things to consider when you kind of see that is that did they need a buff? Yes. Did it need to have the ability to almost reaction roll catch you? And with the way the input system works in the game right now, if you miss your reaction roll and you get hit, it chains into another roll with a queued roll, and you just get hit again.
Mm.
And I don't think that the damage, in consideration to everything else that can roll catch as well as an Uggs can, I think it's fine right now. What worries me is when they nerf some of that stuff, because I mean look at Moonveil, for example, right? Moonveil can roll catch for like 800 damage. So like yeah, and Uggs being able to roll catch isn't a big deal because it's
Mhm.
roll catching for 600, so it's actually worse. But that was just one of the things I thought of when you were talking about you're seeing like that poke play style is that when we see the game nerfed and we see something like Moonveil that only does 400 to 500 damage when you roll catch them instead of 800 to 1,000, is the ability to roll catch as well as an Uggs can a good thing or a bad thing?
We can't unfortunately have our cake and eat it. We can't have Uggs being viable in a setting and not having the ability to reaction roll catch, or at least to have be dangerous enough that you have to be cautious on your approach in that sense, right?
Right.
Or you can't like just be spamming roll. So an Uggs that does 600 damage in the game right now that can more or less reaction roll catch and also do have some interesting mind games. That's not an issue.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, not
Post
right now.
patch, post patch. Let's say all the damage numbers are like removed by like a factor of like 5. Like we should be. I'd still think having an UG show up in a tournament and for it to be, if not optimal, at least be viable. I think that's a
Mhm.
good world. I don't think that's a bad thing per se. I think it's so long as like everyone understands. Okay, he's gonna go for the crouch poke, and he's gonna mind game his way and go for mix ups from there. That's a reasonable enough world. I think I don't really see an issue with it, to be honest with you. If it means more people are going to take more stuff into the competitive scene, that's
Mhm.
aces in my book, unfortunately.
No, no, I think that the UG system as the game sits right now is completely fine and definitely not a problem. There's far more things like Bloodhound Step that could be worked on. That before they even consider looking at UGs, and if they ever need to look at UGs. And I don't think that even when the game is properly balanced, I don't think we'll see UGs. We'll see it more than Dark Souls 3. We'll see it more because it has a lot more potential. Um,
Mm.
I don't think we'll see it. Once a more defined meta comes along, I
Well,
don't think we'll see it as much as we would like to, because at the end of the day, it's still slow.
Yeah.
And even with poise and everything else that they've added into the game and the Ashes of War, if the damage gets balanced out, then fundamental play will come back, and if fundamental play comes back, the faster the stuff is, the better.
well, you actually just gave me a good segue to move into So far we've been speculating about things that we don't have any control over because we're not from software, we're not the devs. But since we are tournament organizers, we can talk about how we would regulate that. And I know you guys have already been experimenting with that. So I guess Labu and Enda, starting with you guys, how would you regulate Poise as it is right now for your events?
Oh man, do you want to go first, LB?
Sure, I'll go first. Poise as it sits, I think personally as a player, I think 61 poise is fine. I don't think you need to go higher. But as a tournament organizer, as somebody who's going to be putting stuff together that is going to really wants to show the highest level of play and make things as player dependent as possible, I think 100 poise is fair. And the
Yeah,
reason I
I
think
agree.
100 poise is fair is because you need to have more than 100 to get through some of those heavier attacks. Like I think we talked about Halberd R1 being 103 and Halberd R2 being 110, 113, whichever exactly it is. You shouldn't have a Halberd and be able to walk through that. I think a lot of people here would agree with that. You shouldn't have a great sword and be able to walk through that. But being able to walk through the one-handed version of the Halberd, okay, that's fair. And in order for me to get that on my build, I do still have to give up at least one talisman slot, probably two, to get to that poise break and not be overweight. So I think there is a little bit of balance if you look at the 100 poise area. I think that's a good number to look at because if you know anything about the poise breaks and where the poise breaks lie, the most important one after 61 is over 100. A lot of people will run 94 because that's going to get them through halberd R1s, and if you're fighting a halberd, you're probably going to have a way to get to 94 poise. But if you aren't fighting a halberd, you're probably going to go with 61 poise and get those talisman slots back for that sword ring, shield ring, sword talisman and shield talisman, as well as the red, the RTSR, the BTSR equivalents, and things along those lines, or maybe if all the other things that you could do with the different talismans in this game, the counter thrust stuff like that. So I do think the balancing point really comes in if you're looking at sub 100. And I would try to maintain that as much as possible would be the way that I would look at it. And that's actually one of the things I help out a little bit with the rules and stuff in the PvP server. And one of the things that we decided to limit it at was 100 for all the reasons that I just kind of went over as well.
Yeah, I think as it stands right now, in both the tournament that we organized, it would be yesterday. So in other words, it's the 26th now. So on the 25th, it was a no rule to try and see what was what. And likewise, the tournament I participated in was a SO 150, or sorry, RL
There we go.
150. But it was also not particularly heavy on rules. And I'm gonna be honest, high poise matches aren't that fun to watch, and they're very difficult to cast. And they're also not all that comfy to play in, if I'm honest. When you have double cross Naginata coming at you that you just cannot poise break, it's like, okay, well,
I guess I'll just die then.
This is I'm gonna get two shot. Let's hope I two shot him first. A high poise just makes it much more difficult for all involved, and I think that limiting it, we'll start experimenting as we go on. We can, again, as TOs, we can run limited at 60 poise or 60. Is it 61 as the break point for like the?
Yes, so
Yeah.
60, 61, and also depending on decimals. So actually, really, I just think this is really interesting. And I'm sorry to segue, and I will answer your question immediately after I say this, but because of how decimals work in the game, it's entirely possible that the poise break is actually completely lower, but the only way to get over the lower number is to reach 61 poise in game. Because the way decimals work, which is just interesting. Like the poise break could be like 59.99, but the only attainable armor that's over 59.99 gets you to 61. Like it's the lowest that you can get to with attainable armor, which is just an interesting thought. And there's been a little bit of research done on that I haven't seen too much about, but it was similar stuff that they noticed, which I thought was cool because the game works off decimals. But yeah, 61 poise gets you through power stance light weapons like a straight sword, katanas, daggers, things of the like.
Okay, that's in. Well, we can have a tournament where that's the poise limit, and we can ban. We can ban the talismans that allow you to go over it, like the bull goat. And likewise, we can go, okay, let's limit it at this amount. And we can then just look at the games, look at how easy they were to either cast, look at how much people enjoyed it, look at how people really enjoyed playing in it. we have this opportunity now. We're it's ground zero right now. We get to create the scene and test out stuff and see how it works. Because it's okay labbing stuff, but seeing how the audience takes it and seeing how the players take it are two very, very different things. I say play around with that.
Well,
Go on.
you're going to get complaints about that, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. So, like, I was the first person to limit perseverance and e-bolt uses, and everybody complained and picked on me. So I limited them to 5 or to 10. I limited pers and e-bolt both to 10. I did 5 tournaments. Everybody complained. Then I limited them to 5, and I did 5 more tournaments, and everybody complained. And then, years later, you found out this is how every tournament is. So by doing things out of the box like this, by pioneering things like this, is how you actually discover how things are going to be, how they should be. Like, people are going to complain about that, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And at the end of the day, like, all those people I complained to, it was like, I'm going to do 80, I didn't know at that time, but it ended up, I was like, I'm going to do plenty of tournaments. It ended up being over 80, but in the grand scheme of things, like doing like 10 tournaments, 5 and 5 to test these things was the right thing to do.
I agree 100%. Yeah, sometimes like you have to experiment. Because like with me and some of my tournaments, I like to challenge the conventional thinking when it comes to like what the meta level should be or like other things. Like for Bloodborne, everyone wanted to play at 120, and I thought that was way too high for Bloodborne because there was way less stats in Bloodborne. So I limited, or I think like starting out, um, my meta level for Bloodborne was 100, but I did open it up to 120 later on, just to allow people to have more health. But personally, like with my builds and how I play Bloodborne, I always played at level 100 because I felt like that was a better meta level for that game. But yeah, for tournament rules, like you should experiment. Um, at least if there's like nothing on the line, like if there's like no like big prize pool, that's more okay. Perhaps for like bigger tournaments, bigger prize pools, you should stick to what's considered the norm. But yeah, we should definitely experiment and try different things because we may find something that would be better for the game health overall in the long term.
Yeah, now's the chance.
I would agree with that. I think if anybody here understands theory crafting and seeing what rules work, Brena is definitely one of the people that's very very experienced in that. And I definitely agree with that. That it takes time to figure out, and just because people aren't happy with it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. One of the things that Brennan brought up, it's really, really important to remember when you're theory crafting for rules. It's entirely possible you could be wrong and you throw it in a tournament and it turns out terrible. And it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely a mistake. But like for example, Brennan mentioned that he limited perseverance and expo bolts to 10, and by the time that I was doing tournaments, it was the norm to have expo bolts banned completely and have perseverance limited to 5 at most.
Yep.
As people eventually realize that yes, these things don't really have a place in a tournament, and they encourage you to play a way that is not necessarily skillful or player dependent, and to the point where it was the norm to have them even more limited than what Brena originally limited them at. And I think this is important to remember when you're looking at rules and stuff. Like, I'll just use poison as an example since we were talking about that. Let's say we limit poise at 100. There's a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, well, I like running my full bull go. I like doing this. But over the course of time, it would probably even end up being lower if the poise never gets changed and or stay the same. And it would be very commonly accepted. Think of 2024 Elden Ring. They probably will have extremely high limitations extremely low limitations for poise and stuff like that.
So rule sets, maybe this is a slight tangent, and we kind of seen it happen in DS3. It was one of the reasons why I started casting initially. So I have a background, I teach fencing, more or less. And there is a rule in that called right of way. Basically means if a guy is coming forward at you, you have to stop that attack before you can attack again, basically, is the idea. And what this leads to, this all the tournaments in the historical fencing scene that I do have different rules, and it is fascinating to watch around right of way and stuff. It's fascinating to watch how, for each tournament, the system is gamed by the contestants.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came in, there had been, albeit very well tested, and I have to say, like, kudos to Brena for making the system and all the other TOs over the years who've made it. But when you have a meta that's existed for 5 years, it has been gamed out of existence. The best setups have either already been found, or the best counter setups to the best setups have been found, and so on and so on. Having like a flexible enough rule set that like every 6 months we can change stuff around, and for the game to be like have enough viable things in it that we can do that would be the preferable idea, I suppose. Be it about poise, like for 6 months we have low poise limit, so you're only allowed to have the 61 poise, and then have a high poise limit, say for another 6 months of like 100 poise or 101 poise or whatever it may be. Having that ability to swap things around and mess with the players so that they have to approach the game differently, I think will improve the longevity of the game,
Yeah.
and I think make it things more exciting to watch later on down the line. So, yeah, go on.
I just wanted to elaborate on that.
Mhm.
In my experience of when you want to do something like that, you want to do it pretty early in the game cycle. Like for Dark Souls 3, people started leaving by like a year and a half in. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
for Elden Ring, people have already started to leave. So I would recommend that for like doing something like you're doing, like this theory crafting, that
Mhm.
we basically do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
Because
for
players
sure.
are more agreeable to set up builds or like do specific things to play in tournaments like early. Like another example is for Dark Souls 3 tournaments is like we didn't see any meming in any like Dark Souls 3 tournament until like the middle or late of 2017. So everybody was like really serious about playing in these tournaments. They loved it and they wanted to do it correctly for about a year and a half. And then you're just going to get like whatever out of the players. Something else is that I did starter classes tournaments. I did 2 of that for Dark Souls 3 and also did 2 60+6s. But I did those like so early that there were so many players that we were able to do something like that. And being so early in the game, you could do that or test that or figure out whatever because everybody was still so interested that they didn't mind setting something up. Towards the end, people are like, I want to do this idea, and it makes people make a build, and it's like, that's not going to happen, dude. Nobody's going to like make a build for a tournament 3 or 4 years like after the game comes out. Please continue, Enda.
You are correct. Yeah, you have, especially when like the interest is kind of like now is the time. Although we'll see.
Yeah,
I don't
now's
think
the
we've
time.
seen a game. I
Yeah.
don't think we've seen a game this big in like
Ever.
FromSoft history.
The biggest game ever.
The biggest game. It's huge.
Yeah, some of
But
us
I
haven't
don't
even
think
beaten the game yet.
I mean, myself included, dude. It's
I just beat it today. Literally, I have 180 hours. I just beat the final boss today. Took me
I
forever.
don't want to play the how many
No
hours do we have
spoilers.
in Elden Ring game.
But yeah, it's. I think this game might have a stronger chance of having bigger longevity than any of the other ones as well, just by pure numbers alone. That is a possibility. Like, how many? Oh man, this was so sad. How many people was the game down when the servers dropped for DS3? Wasn't it like 2,000? It was something like that. There was like 2,000 players less on Steam after the servers went down, and some of those are
What's
co-opers.
I mean,
what's your question again? Sorry. Oh,
So
when the servers
when
went
the
down.
servers went down on PC, like I think it only the player numbers only dropped by like 2,000 or something like that. It
It
was
went to like
pretty grim.
or something like
yeah,
that, I think, right?
Yeah.
the multiplayer community is what keeps these games alive naturally.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And I mean, we're going back to what Brendan said. Like, I agree 100%. The time for experimentation is now. Typically when you take away someone's ability to use like the heavy meta stuff, what happens? They end up finding something that's either just as good, if not better, Kind of like with what happened with the harp in Dark Souls 3, people didn't take it seriously initially until they started experimenting with it, and then they realized, oh wow, this weapon is great. I can do damage through shields. It's really fast. And then they went on the Murky Hand Scythe, and then that became the new meta. But
It's
yeah,
really
you
important
know,
to regulate that stuff, but and you do that theory crafting and you do all these tweaks and you continue to do that, and Enda was given time frame 6 months or whatever. But remember, it's also important to every once in a while give everybody like virtually everything back and to see
mhm,
like what you get out of it, because you never know when you're going to see that somebody has
yeah,
come out with like something new, or they're going to do something that you haven't seen before, and that's when
yeah,
you're going to get it, is when you give people stuff. Please
yeah.
continue.
Yeah, no, you're right. People discover new metas, and then the old meta ends up not being meta anymore. So like you may have
Exactly.
to unban some things after that new meta is discovered, and you get through experimentation and limitations, like you end up with a better game and a better community.
Some of the first tournaments I ran were on a ban system. So basically, it was separated out into teams, and one team would ban three weapons in a ring, and then the next team would ban three weapons in a ring, and it was cumulative. Kept going and going and going until you were left with like really weird stuff come the end of the tourney. And people really had fun. It was a shame I didn't keep it up, but seeing what people do with like really restrictive rule sets and stuff like that can be super fun as well. So the inverse is just as true, I think, Bren. Like seeing what people can use when they're forced to use other setups can be really, really fun
True.
as well, especially in a competitive setting.
Would anyone like to add on to that?
Well, that's the important thing. Like now is the time. Like within the first like year to a year and a half, like we can do all this like heavy theory crafting and get things finalized. You know,
Mm.
have like a super tight, super nice ban list, and then occasionally slack off on it and give people stuff and see what you get, because you
Hmm.
Mm.
you want to find that stuff out, and that could be like where you're going to see this stuff is in a tournament. Like that's
Hmm.
what they're for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think now that I've finally beaten the game, I can do that more. I can do more experimentation and build videos and you know make those experimentations and
Mhm.
see how to change the meta for the better. So I think yeah we do, the whole community just needs more time, more people to just finish the game, and once that's done, then we can really see like how the meta changes and what the real meta will be, because
And for
it's still early, it's still very
And for
early.
people to give it a chance, like a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of gave up on it already. I know a guy
Hmm.
that he did like invasions for like a day or two and was like, I'm going back to Dark Souls 3, and was like already playing Dark Souls 3. And
Yeah. That's definitely the
Such a
wrong
I feel
mindset.
shame.
Yeah.
like I'm gonna try to give the game as much opportunity as possible. Trust me, I had my frustrations. There was like I don't know what day of the week it was, like last week, and I was like, I can't see myself playing this game. Like this is absolute
Hmm. Hmm.
insanity, like how they have neglected like really like I felt like they neglected like really important things,
Hmm.
but I later I realized that like, hey, maybe I had like a bad day. I remembered
Hmm.
how like on Dark Souls 3, like towards the end, I'm not the best player, but I was
Hmm.
doing pretty well. But every once in a while
Hmm.
you can have a bad day. It can happen. Everybody can have a bad day or a bad couple of days. You just decompress, come back, and try to do better, and then try to have a good time, try to be positive, and
Hmm.
those things did come back. Like I
Yeah.
continued to play the game, and have had like 5 or 6 different play sessions since that like really bad day, and they were really good. I did a play session last night, streamed for 3 hours, played PvP for about two, and it went incredibly well. In
Hmm.
addition to that, and like the Enda's tournament and then Shaolin's tournament, I could see a lot of the potential in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Like
kind of in the
even
same boat. But carry on, Knight, please.
yeah, no, no, I'm in the same boat too. Like even with Poise as it is and how much I dislike it, I didn't just give up on it completely. Like I still try to find ways around it. I didn't think, okay, there's nothing I can do, so I should just give up. No, like I still try to find ways around fighting those play styles. It mostly relies on being passive, but like I still tried. I didn't like rage at the game. And there's always patches. FromSoft will most likely patch the game and fix some of the things that need tuning.
Well, Dark Souls 3 was like heavily like it was kind of more matchmaking based. Like I felt like for Dark Souls 2 PvP, like they really focused on that, and you can kind of almost use like whatever you want and you could do well. But in Dark Souls 3, it was like, okay, that guy's got this weapon, so my weapon's not going to really do that well. Well, I started like hard swapping, and so the same is probably going to be true for Elden Ring. You're going to go in, you're going to see what he's got. You're just going to have a variety of weapons, and you're just going to switch, and you're going to know what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's like a pain in the ass. It's like, you're doing invasions on Dark Souls 3. You go in and you get a guy with doors, and it's like, okay, well, I was using Claymore or Twin Axe, but now we got to switch to like dagger and sword and board. It's just kind of like the nature of the game. Like you have to kind of like play into like what other people are playing. Like for Dark Souls 3, and I know it's true. And then for probably this game, like having the idea like I'm gonna go in with this weapon and this is my build and this is what I'm gonna play. That's only gonna take you so far. Because I was a great sword main on Dark Souls 3, and I got to the point to where I branched out and I started doing the hard swapping, started doing the swaps, like the gun deer swap and other things like this, because choosing like a specific weapon that isn't like a top tier weapon and being bullheaded about sticking with it and not saying that this is you, just giving an example, but it really only took me so far, and there were a lot of fights that I lost because I needed to swap. I fought somebody that was also using a great sword that had like really high latency, like they were in France, and it was just extremely difficult to deal with. So
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention in terms of when we're talking about like longevity of the game and people already leaving the game, because even like not understanding the game aside, like let's say you played the game for 30 hours in 2 weeks and said, "Yup, I know everything there is to know about this game." You have to remember that there's going to be a lot of patches throughout the next probably at least a year or more. And like it's really important to remember that is like I'm not going to stop playing the game until I've reached a point where they're no longer updating the game and I don't like the outcome of the updates they did. And I think that's at least a year, if not 2 or 3 years down the road. We don't know how long they're going to support this game for. I mean, based on everything they've done for it so far, and it's the biggest one we've seen, they could support it for 3 or 4 years, 5, 6 years. And I think that's important to remember. So if anybody is disheartened by the PvP or how it works, is that for one, yeah, the game, you just need to understand it better. There's a lot of things in the game that I've been doing. I have almost 300 hours, and all of those hours have gone almost solely to play testing PvP. And there's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't understand, right? And the other side of the coin that's really, really important to remember when you start to get those days where you just hate the way the game works is that they're going to change stuff. There's no way they leave Bleed as it is. There's no way they leave some of these Asher Wars that do the damage they do. I think there's no way they don't look at Poise. So it's just good to remember that we're in the very beginning of the game and a lot of changes will be coming. I would be very surprised if they don't.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Why
And
do I just have to agree with you? God damn it.
no, that was very well articulated, and he hit all the right points on the head. And I think that's a good area to end the podcast. There's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but we can always save that for future podcasts. I think this was a very good first podcast. We talked about a lot, had some good discussions. And thank you to everyone that was able to come for this first episode. Brena and LB, you guys were great.
Thank you very much, dude.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks for having us.
And it's been a blast.
Thank you. And I guess to end it off, I would like to ask a question for each of us to answer. So, if you could have one thing in Elden Ring, like your top priority thing, what would it be? For me, FromSoft, Miyazaki, Bandai, if you're listening, I want a photo mode. We need a photo mode with an untethered free cam. So that way, for Fight Club hosts and tournament hosts like us, it'll make it a whole lot easier to record fights, watch and record fights. We really need that feature. And if we can get that with like a green screen background feature too, so we can like it'd be easier for us to do thumbnails. Like that'd be cool too. But just an untethered free cam photo mode, like that's my number one priority. I would love to have that. So please add that into the game. Thank you, Brenna.
I'd have to say to answer that question, I'd like to talk about a couple of different aspects of Elden Ring. So your question was if I could change anything about Elden Ring, like what would I?
If you could add if you can add one thing into the game, like your top priority thing, just one thing, what would it be?
If I could add just one thing into the game,
Yeah.
that's really tough. Like this is like the only way I could think of to like it seems to me like what you're asking is like what would I like change about the game is how I'm like interpreting your
Uh,
question. And like to answer that, like I would probably answer that like this, like as far as like their artistic vision for the game, like basically like the PvE is concerned and like how true that they stated that and like what type of like game we have, I would not change anything. As
mhm,
far as like the performance of the game, then I would like to see some adjustments made in there with like the servers, with like the disconnects, with like the wacky movements, like that are
mhm,
all choppy and weird and stuff like this. I guess this is less
mhm,
prevalent on PlayStation than on PC. I'm on PC at the moment.
mhm.
For invasions, I'd probably like to see probably like an adjustment done to the scale down system for
Okay.
the phantoms that the hosts have. And
Okay.
for dueling, I would probably like to see probably like an adjustment done
Mhm.
to I just don't know how I feel about shield poke being the strongest build.
Yeah.
I don't
Uh,
know if
that
that's where we want the game to be. So
that's.
probably like an adjustment to how powerful shield poke is for duels.
Mhm. Well, that'd be a
Hopefully
good
that answered your
discussion.
question.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of went off on like multiple different topics, and those are good topics to go off on for
We'll put that
future
on a notebook
podcasts.
for next time.
But yeah, I was trying to keep it short. Um, but yeah, no, I definitely agree. For like fixing the servers, like that should be a top priority, and I think they are working on that. Hopefully. Um, so Enda, you're next. What's one thing if you could have any one thing add into the game? What would it be? And when I say
I
anything,
feel
it
like
can
a
be
kid.
anything. It can
I
be
feel like oh
anything. Go
no,
ahead.
I feel like a kid in a sweet shop. I don't know what I want. Oh no. Um,
If you want.
basically a dedicated mode that allowed me to make a build, have access to everything, and to then duel people.
I've
Like
been
a
saying for
dedicated PvP mode, a dedicated PvP mode that is just a dueling system that
I've been
uses the game mechanics.
I've been
That's
saying
all
for
I want.
years, you should be able there should be like you turn on the game,
Hmm.
you go to the main menu, new game,
Yeah.
continue, load game, log in, all that. Right there, it's going to say arena. You click on that, you pick your character, you
Yeah.
get to pick 3 different arenas, you get to pick your weapons, your armor, like whatever, and you
Yeah,
go in and you
exactly.
fight people. Like I've been saying this for years. Like this
Build
is
making is one of the most tedious, especially if you want multiple characters and
Yup.
aren't on PC with all of the joys that you have there. If you had a dedicated mode and a spectator mode for it, basically what you wanted as well, we'd be able to do tournaments in no time. We could have any RL, SL, whatever tournament we wanted at a moment's notice.
Hmm.
And it perplexes me that they haven't added something similar to it. That's
Hmm.
what I want, to make it my fighting game for real, as opposed to a pretend fighting game. That's pretty much what I want. So
A,
there you go.
a dedicated mode with everything unlocked. That
Everything
is a
unlocked.
wonderful idea.
Mhm.
LB.
I'm gonna be way more selfish in my answer, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask Mr. Miyazaki to give me a reliable backstab system. That's all I want, man. That's all.
Uh,
That's all I
that is
want.
one thing I
sounds like
don't
we got
miss.
to fish a swap a
We
chat.
got we got a Dark Souls 1 fanboy in here.
That's all I
uh,
just want. Reliable backstabs, man. That's all I want. They can keep angle check in. I just want it to be consistent and reliable.
mhm. All right. Good answers, everyone. And again, thank you for joining the podcast. Thank you for the great discussion. I hope we can do this again in the near future.
Take care,
Yeah.
everyone.
Have a good one.
Later, y'all.
All right. Thank you, and have a good one. Good night. Hey, thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what we had to discuss, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Any and all feedback is welcome. If you have any suggestions for improving the podcast or topics you'd like for us to discuss in the next episode, then please leave your thoughts down below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.